Hi. Um, I suffered through one of the worst films I've ever seen this week. You can guess what it is from the title, and it's to the point where I've actually made notes because there are things I want to talk about. Yesterday is directed by Danny Boyle, written by Richard Curtis, based on another script, about a man who is an aspiring songwriter and performer. He's thinking of jacking the whole thing in because of a lack of success, despite the support of his manager Ellie, with whom he's been friends for years, when suddenly there is a global blackout and he's hit by a bus. And once he gets out of hospital, his friends give him a new guitar as a present, and he strums Yesterday on it, and his friends are absolutely amazed by this beautiful song, and it turns out that they don't remember the Beatles, and no one in the world remembers the Beatles. So he sees a golden opportunity to make lots of money. It's absolutely awful. In almost every respect. I would say that maybe the acting isn't bad. Himesh Patel as Jack Malik is quite good. Lily James as Ellie is okay. They're not bad performances. But Kate McKinnon as the record company executive is clearly phoning it in, and Ed Sheeran cannot even play himself convincingly. The problem with the movie is the script, and it always goes back to the script. It doesn't make the single slightest bit of sense. The world is exactly the same as it was before, except there's no Coke, no Coca-Cola, there's no Harry Potter, and there's no Beatles. But apart from that, apart from these three cornerstones of 20th and early 20th century culture, the world's exactly the same. Have a little think about that and you'll realise what a terrible concept this is. The idea of the Beatles suddenly no longer existing is not even an original idea. It's been done in other films, it's been done on TV, it's been done in comics. It's not an original idea, and yet the film just splats it out onto the screen and then doesn't develop it at all in any way. In any way at all. In fact, the film is based on another script written by Mackenzie Crook and Jack Baths, I think his name was, called Cover Version, which is the same setup, except it's mainly about the effect of the main character trying to establish the music of the Beatles in the world and not having that much success, which is at least plausible, because as soon as he plays a Beatles song to anyone in Yesterday, he's immediately hailed as being a complete genius. And obviously the songs are great, but they are a specific product of time, place, culture, influence. They didn't just magically appear out of a vacuum in a way that Curtis and Boyle seem to think they did. There was an evolution, there was a development of the music. It came out of rhythm and blues, it came out of rock and roll, it came out of American traditions and British traditions, and then flowed into their early work, and then that segued into their later, much more non-commercial, perhaps more experimental work. But all of it is just treated as one big globule of music in this film, completely divorced from any kind of context. And it is idiotic to such a degree. I am amazed that this film exists, because it is so lacking in intelligence. It's such a stupid concept. I said earlier in last year, when the trailer was released, if I see a worse film than Yesterday this year, and this was for having just seen the trailer, if I see a worse film this year, I will eat cat food during my Review of the Year podcast. And I think I'm going to be fine, because I've seen some real shit in the last year, but this takes the fucking cake. What else have I written here? There's no passion in the direction. It's a really neutrally directed film. It doesn't look like a Boyle film at all. It doesn't have that kinetic energy that Train Spotting or The Beach or 28 Days Later or Millions or any of his other films have. There's no sense of coiled spring energy. There's no, visual flair that there is in every single one of his other films. It's baffling that Boyle chose to direct this over doing a Bond film. Now, he left what eventually evolved into No Time to Die because of creative differences with the producers. So it makes me wonder, how much creative control did he have when he was making this, if this was what he wanted to do instead? Because it looks like a fucking mess. Late in the film, we get a cameo by Robert Carlyle as John Lennon, who in this version of the universe never became famous and therefore was never murdered. And he's just an old man living in a house by the sea, minding his own business, with a very obviously fake nose and a bit of a shaky Liverpool accent. But he's treated as though he's some kind of mystical guru. And the Beatles' music is treated as though they are incantations. There is no thought given to the idea that music is an evolutionary process. Music develops from one state into another over time. You can look at the development of music and you see the progress of evolution itself. But as far as this film is concerned, the Beatles' music exists entirely separate from all other things. It has no connection with anything else, which is, it's not how it works. And I realise I'm reiterating this point, but it is so moronic, it's so imbecilic that I cannot believe that people who have made good work in the past consider this to be even half a suitable concept for a film. And to really poke you in the eye with it, the whole thing is sidelined. I mean, the original script, as I say, was more about the concept of the world without the Beatles and trying to introduce their music. Here it's almost all sidelined in favour of the central love story between Jack and Ellie. And they don't have that much chemistry, although they're both fair actors trying to make bricks without straw. But it's just, their love story is so bland and so frictionless and so uninteresting, and yet it sidelines everything else. I don't know what Curtis and Boyle think they're doing. This film is such a complete joke. And we also have Ed Sheeran as himself, and not very good at playing himself, acting as kind of the sort of shepherding Jack through the music industry, and acknowledging what a genius he is because he's able to supposedly write The Long and Winding Road in 5 minutes. But at the final scene, which is sort of the romantic climax of the story, you'd think, well, there's no shortage of great Beatles love songs, and we've only heard a fifth, maybe, of their catalogue. At one point, he's got post-it notes all over the wall of songs that he can rip off. One of them's Revolution 9, which, if you don't know, is this incoherent art sound collage that was one of Lennon's pet projects. It's not a song, it's a bit of sound art that was released on an album. You can't make another version of that. He's not going to remember how it goes because it's just a load of stuff. But you think, yes, at the end, when they get together, there's no shortage of Beatles love songs. Fine. No, we have an Ed Sheeran song. Because of course we do. Now, the thing that annoys me here is, firstly, we've got Curtis buying up someone else's script, rewriting it to make it worse. We've got a concept that's been done time and time and time before, not necessarily with the Beatles, but with many other musicians whose work suddenly disappears from culture. We've got Ed Sheeran, who has been forced to add other people's names to songwriting credits because he's plagiarised them. So we've got a film about plagiarism, made by plagiarists, and the main character apparently has no real problem with suddenly deciding that he can make a lot of money and success out of ripping off the Beatles' music just because no one remembers it anymore. But at the end, he decides to give it all away because he suddenly feels bad. There was a subplot that was cut of Jack having an affair with some sort of beautiful woman played by Anna de Armas. That's cut entirely from the movie because it was felt that it made him less sympathetic. He's already unsympathetic. He's already totally mercenary and exploiting other people's work for his own gain. So I don't know what kind of brain produces this. I don't know what has gone wrong with Danny Boyle and Richard Curtis that they could have produced something this absolutely awful, this tone-deaf, incoherent, wimpishly childish, facile drivel. It is the worst film I've seen this year, by a considerable margin, and it's one of the worst films I've ever seen. It's fucking terrible, and I'm angry.